We need to talk about ideas, good ones and bad ones. We need to learn stuff about the world. We need an honest, intelligent, thought-provoking, and entertaining review of what the hell happened on this planet in the last 7 days. We need to sit back and listen to the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove.
Yes, we're back, dear listener. Episode 474 of the Iron Fist and the Velvet Glove podcast. I'm Trevor. Over there is Joe, the tech guy. I want to ask you, Joe, how you are, because I know you've had a tough time, but he's with us and he says, good evening.
Yeah.
Right. So what's been happening in the last week, or last few days, actually? Some interesting news. I mean, it's not every day that the United States just bombs another country for no good reason.
I thought that was every day.
Maybe it is every day. Maybe. Come to think of it, this is just a regular occurrence, and this particular one has got more attention than most of them. But yes, America has decided to bomb a country that was posing absolutely no threat to it whatsoever. And no threat to anyone, for that matter, at least not in any urgent type of situation. So, yep. That's the topic of the discussion, dear listener, is involvement of the good old disunited states of America and its bombing of the nuclear facilities in Iran. What happened? What have people been saying about it? We'll give you all the news that you need so that if you're at a dinner party or a coffee shop and someone starts just talking bullshit about it, you'll at least be armed with some of the facts and figures. So that's where we're heading for. A bit of a late start this evening. So only one person watching. We're an hour late because I just finished off a 3-hour body corporate meeting, dear listener. So this body corporate is taking up a lot of time. But yeah, anyway. Right. What are we going to talk about? What's on the agenda? What did Trump announce? And what did people think of it? What's some polling attitudes in America? I've got a bunch of different clips, and we'll see how we go. So yeah, Donald Trump announced on Twitter, because, I mean, this is how you find out what the US government is up to, Joe, is you just, well, he's not on Twitter, but...
No, on Truth.
Yes. But there are Twitter accounts that basically just mirror his Truth account so that you don't need to go onto Truth and watch it. You can just they just reproduce everything on a fake.
Talking of Truth, have you seen when Truth had a SPAC attack?
When who had a SPAC attack?
Truth Social.
Oh, the actual platform did?
Yeah.
No.
So someone went to look at Trump's account and it went Donald Trump, and underneath it went no truths found.
Yeah.
Kind of sums it up, really, doesn't it?
It does. I hope they weren't expecting one, any truths. But yeah. So he announced, we have completed our very successful attack on the 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordow, Natanz and Esfahan. All planes are now outside of Iran airspace. A full payload of bombs in capital letters. His use of capital letters is so juvenile.
So boomerish.
Yes. Was dropped on the primary site for Dow. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. And in capitals, now is the time for peace! ! Thank you for your attention to this matter. Joe, quite often these things are finishing with thank you for your attention to this matter. It's a habit he's falling into.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody else posted, they went back through the archives and found what Emperor Hirohito tweeted about a similar event. Did you see that one?
Tweeted?
Yes.
Okay.
This is on the real Hirohito
okay.
Twitter account. We have completed our very successful attack on Hawaii. All planes are now outside of American airspace. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Pearl Harbor. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great Japanese warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. In capitals, now is the time for peace. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It's all the same thing. The hypocrisy. Just an example of it. Then he fronted the press and I've got a little clip of what he had to say. Here we go.
Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight, I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
You know, what was that one? 36 seconds? The #1 state sponsor of terror? Surely America has that crown. The facilities were completely obliterated. Well, it seems, Joe, the jury is out on that one. Like, there's a fair chance that, in fact, the facilities...
Yeah, they're waiting for the BDAs, aren't they?
What does the BDA stand for?
Bomb damage assessment.
Right, okay. They're the bully boys of the Middle East. I can think of another country that maybe you could possibly call the bully boys.
I did listen to an interesting interview yesterday or the day before that was saying America basically had been coerced into it by Israel.
Yes.
Israel had to do it now because they couldn't overfly Syria before, but now that Syria is a collapsed regime, they can overfly Syria. So now was the time to do it. And now that they've suppressed the air defense and done most of the hard work, the Americans can come in and just finish off the last little bit that they couldn't do. They didn't have the infrastructure or they didn't have the bombs for.
So, of course, this is a president who campaigned on not starting any more wars and in particular bagged Obama as wanting to start a fight with Iran to win an election. And yeah, just his final thing in that 36 seconds was now's the time for making peace and kind of ignoring the fact that the Iranians were engaged in talks and negotiations when they got bombed. So pretty hard to entice the Iranians back to peace talks when the last time you were talking to them, you just bombed them in the middle of those talks.
But also that Obama had negotiated a perfectly good settlement that seemed to be working.
Yeah, may not have been perfect, but it was doing the trick.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Trump called Iran the bully of the Middle East. Israel's bombed 5 countries and invaded 3 in the last 2 years alone, but Iran is the bully. As Caitlin Johnson said, it's hard to focus, Joe, hard to concentrate. It's hard to focus on Israel's airstrikes in Lebanon due to Israel's invasion of Syria, which is hard to focus on due to Israel's atrocities in the West Bank, which are hard to focus on due to Israel's genocide in Gaza, which is now hard to focus on due to Israel's war on Iran. You know, they're taking a leaf out of the Trump playbook where Trump just does so much shit and so much crazy stuff that he gets away with because you don't have a chance to talk properly about what he's done because he's on to the next crazy thing. So that's what the Israelis are doing now is just mounting up crazy actions, and we can't talk properly about the stuff that they've already done. Let's see. This was an interesting one, I thought. Remember, Joe, I thought that maybe there could be a false flag. I thought that maybe the Israelis would, I don't know, send a missile somewhere and make it look like it was an American, make it look like it was an Iranian attack on some US infrastructure to try and get the US to come in
and be involved. So I was predicting the possibility of a false flag attack. And I love this comment from Harrison Smith. They didn't even have the courtesy to false flag us at first. So
Nope.
now that may seem like a little more than a grim but funny joke, but in fact it exposes a deeper truth about yesterday's reckless, illegal and unprovoked US bombing. The fact that Trump chose to cross such an enormous red line without even bothering to manufacture a shred of consent. So it's a decisive turn. We've entered a new phase of Western global savagery in which all pretenses have been dropped and only the logic of raw, unrestrained violence remains. So Western ruling classes now openly embrace a mafia-style gangsterism. So, yep, they just are basically saying we feel like it, so we just do it, and they don't even have the courtesy to manufacture a false flag incident. Deja Vu by Chris Hedges. He makes the point that this is so reminiscent of Iraq with the weapons of mass destruction and all those arguments from 22 years ago with the 2003 war in Iraq are basically being revisited. America has learnt no lessons from Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya and Syria. Those places were a catastrophe. If this continues, it's a catastrophe. And I think I will just skip the rest of what he has to say there. Joe, polling of the US population just prior to the bombing raid. So do Americans think... Sorry?
I was going to say, I heard those figures announced the other day.
Most Americans think the US military should not get involved in the conflict between Israel and Iran. So overall, US citizens saying that the US should not be involved, this is prior to the bombing, because remember, attitudes change after wars start, where everybody sort of gathers around the flag and suddenly becomes feeling they need to support their government. But anyway, at that time, 60% said US should not be involved, 24% said not sure. So only 16% of US adult citizens were in favour of America getting involved in the conflict between Iran and Israel. That's an incredibly low number, Joe. Even for, it surprises me that crazy Americans who seem to love wars are sick of them.
No, that was why they didn't want to get involved in Ukraine. The Republicans were anti getting involved. They were going, why are we wasting our tax dollars on fighting other wars?
Yes.
And that's why Trump allegedly got out of Afghanistan, or rather why he handed Afghanistan over to the Taliban and then blamed Biden for doing that.
Because Biden basically sort of carried on the exit that had been triggered already. Is that how it worked? Yeah. Yeah. He should have done a better exit is what they were complaining about. Yeah. But the exit had already been predetermined. Yeah.
Well, basically, Trump had signed over all rights. As long as no US troops were attacked, he didn't care what happened.
Yeah. So 60% a definite no, America shouldn't be involved. 24% don't know. Even amongst Republicans, 53% of Republicans say America should not be involved. 24% don't know. Only 23% say yes. Amongst Democrats, 65% say America shouldn't be involved. Only 15% think that they should. So that's a really telling statistic. But, Joe, the way that democracies work, and I'll get onto that in a minute, doesn't matter what the people want. The leaders of our democracies are just managing our nations completely contrary to what most of the people want.
Yeah, it's only what the corporations want they care about.
Yes. Or what the Israeli lobbyists want.
Well, that day.
there was a Gallup poll just talking about sympathies and basically showing that sympathy for Israelis is still higher than for Palestinians, but it's getting close to a crossover point. And sympathy for Palestinians back in 2003, 2005 was running around 15 to 18%, and that's up to 33%. Sort of pro-Israel used to be around 60%. It's down to 46%. So there has been so much bad publicity for Israel that opinion is shifting, Joe, towards Palestinians. That'll cross over. Yeah, in the chat room, Andrew says, at least the Pentagon gets to test real world in the field testing of its B-2 stealth bombers and bunker-busting bombs. Will help in development of 2.0 versions. Yeah. Joe, the bits I'm reading suggest it's unlikely that they did actual real damage, but...
Yeah, I don't know. And apparently the B-2 is, I believe, on its way to being retired anyway.
Oh, being retired? Because it's reached the end of its...
Basically, whereas the B-52 just keeps on going.
Right, but the B-2 is... that would make sense. Hello to Alison as well in the chat room. Okay, so that was attitudes on those things. Joe, how did we get here again? These are my thoughts. So an immoral and dangerous action that most citizens did not want, and seemingly an action that Trump himself campaigned against. We've got a small minority pressured and lobbied and threatened with sufficient power to overcome the majority of Americans and the instincts of Trump. In response, Western democracies, like Australia, contrary to their citizens' wishes, give approval and consent to the bombing. It's the global south which China, Russia, the Middle East, Africa, South America, most of Asia, they're the ones, many of whom are not democracies, that are condemning this bombing. I say, clearly, Western democracy is not delivering what it purports to achieve, which is supposed to be reflecting the wishes of its people. Money via the military-industrial complex, the media, mostly Murdoch, and the Israel lobby have captured the reins of Western governments. We, the people, are riding the horse, but we don't hold the reins. That's it's a minority view that is taking over. It is the tail wagging the dog, Joe. And this is not what most people want, but we're getting it anyway, like it or not. How do we even get a small minority how do we even get a minority, Joe, of ordinary citizens who do agree with this bombing? Because I do look on Facebook and other stuff and see friends and former friends, Joe, making comments or reproducing articles favourable about the attack by America and Israel on Iran.
Well, because it's been whitewashed in the only news sources they read.
Seems to be. It's so disappointing. So yeah, I see it on Facebook, repeating pro-Israel, anti-Iran news articles. Joe, we spent a lot of time on this podcast in the early years basically talking about those crazy Muslim theocracies and how bad things were. And they are bad. But guys, something worse is happening. Like, it's one thing to force women to cover up with a hijab or a burqa, but it is another thing to be blowing women and children up in pieces
It was a
by the
surgical
tens
strike.
of thousands.
these wankers, Joe, one of their first statements they'll make is, those theocracies in Iran forcing women, what about women's rights? And it's like, well, what about the Palestinian women and children's rights to fucking live? Don't worry about what your address is for the moment, at least just to survive and eat. I can't believe that these people are resorting to those sort of tropes when there's something far more important going on, life and death.
Well, but it's been going on forever.
So I get it with Jewish Zionists, totally indoctrinated by their culture. I mean, I look at Jewish people that I know here in Australia and I go, okay, I get it. You're at Shabbat every Friday. You are in a cultural bubble that, of course, you are going to think that way, and I don't really expect otherwise. But people outside that sort of Jewish culture, Joe, who don't go to Shabbat every Friday night for an indoctrination session, here's my theory. I've got one person in particular in my mind when I'm thinking this. Well, two people, in fact, but, one of them, I think. And I think, Joe, with these people, they believe that liberal Western democracies that have embraced the Enlightenment principles are the pinnacle of civilization and are the good guys. Other people are the bad guys, or their leaders are the bad guys, and the general population are unfortunately uneducated savages. And if the good guys, the liberal Western democracies, are protecting liberal Western democracies from threats, then anything is justified and the ends justify the means. And when you are in the pro-Enlightenment tribe, you'll swallow your tribe's propaganda and dismiss contrary evidence. When you're in the pro-Enlightenment tribe, you'll rationalise the actions of your tribe no matter how heinous. And consequently, Joe, these dupes will talk about women wearing veils in Iran while ignoring women and children being blown up in Gaza. They will talk about evil, aggressive Iranian leaders while ignoring the genocidal Israelis and Americans. What do you think, Joe? The theory of these pro-Enlightenment people who are thinking
I think it's probably a misnomer because I'm very pro-Enlightenment. I think it was a good thing. I think we've drifted from our Enlightenment ideals. And I think the Western world, the first world, whatever you want to call it, has become a tool of corporations who are more interested in profits than people. And I think this is just a very extreme example of that. But I can think of considerably, there are doing plenty of things to us, the populace, that is just as detrimental, just not as obvious. And if not held to account, they will do whatever they can to make a profit and screw everybody in their health.
This guy, Ho Grammer, said on Twitter, historically, when Americans suddenly care about women's rights in a Middle Eastern country, those women are about to get bombed. I think that's right.
Well, yeah, but of course they don't care about the woman who was kept on life support, even though she was dead, brain dead, just to serve as an incubator for a baby that's going to be born premature and disabled and probably won't survive for very long.
Yes, a sort of a forced baby delivery in America. Yes. Yeah. It's a bit of there's a sort of inherent racism element in all this, I think. Here's an interview, Piers Morgan and George Galloway, which encapsulates some of this, I think.
Iran is presently the hero of the vast majority of people in the world.
Oh, rubbish.
And it's
absolute
the fact
rubbish.
that you can't see
what a
that.
load of absolute
Piers,
nonsense.
take your eyes off the posterior
Absolute
of the tiny
nonsense.
part of the
Nonsense.
world, which is the Western world.
You think that
Africa
currently
is with
most
Iran.
of the world, you think the rest of
Latin
the world is...
America is with Iran.
You think the rest of the world is...
China is with Iran.
Yeah, who?
Russia is with Iran.
Russia,
All the
China.
Arabs are with Iran.
Russia, China,
Take
any
your
other...
nose out of the
North Korea?
of the tiny number of people that you think are the world. They're not the world. The world is 8 billion people.
Right.
You're speaking for the little clique that leads a tiny fraction of fewer than 1 billion of the people of the world.
So just to be clear,
you cannot see beyond the end of your nose.
As I suggested, then you want to put up as a defence for Iran that they're supported by China, Russia. Did you mention North Korea?
That's a lot of people, isn't it?
Oh yeah, but are they the kind of people, in terms of their own regimes, that we should be taking as good supporters of these benevolent people
You're
in
living
Tehran?
under Keir Starmer's regime, for God's sake. You're going to blame the British for Keir Starmer? The French are living under little Macron. When did you get the right to decide that 7/8 of the world's population cannot be considered valid because you, Piers Morgan, don't like their regimes?
There was some straight talking there, Joe. I mean, it would, I mean, I don't know.
They're both idiots.
Yes, but it's a good point in that Piers Morgan was just, you've got to be kidding that the majority of the world is behind Iran. But there's a...
I would say the majority of the world isn't. Possibly the leaders of the majority of people in the world are. I think the average person doesn't give a damn.
I reckon the majority of the world who... Well, you're probably right, Joe, actually.
Yeah, I reckon...
If you're in South America or in Africa or somewhere, you'd go, Iran what?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what you're saying?
I reckon if you poll 80% of Indians, 80% of Chinese people, now that's a quarter of the world's population.
Right.
And they'd go, what's going on? Because they're too busy with their own worlds and their own lives. And, you know, just
I reckon
because,
this one's big enough, Joe. I reckon this one's big enough to get through the attention span of
I
a
think
lot of these people.
I think it's a bit arrogant to go just because the leader of a country with 1 billion people means that they have the support of 1 billion people. So, yeah, I mean...
I don't think there's going to be any sympathy amongst the populace of those countries for Israel. And
probably not.
yeah, I reckon of the two, the one most likely to be correct would be Galloway rather than Piers Morgan.
Yeah, but I wouldn't say there's much in it.
Right. All right. Andrew's put up, Alex put up a link about awful things people are doing, and says Murdoch Press has them well trained. Yeah. Okay. What else have I got here next? So, as Chris Hedges points out, Joe, you just get these same people trotted out as experts to talk on panel shows. And as he writes, all the ghouls who sold us these past wars on false pretenses, such as conservative talk show host Mark Levin, Max Boot, David Frum, John Bolton, General Jack Keane, Newt Gingrich, Sean Hannity, Thomas Friedman, have returned to saturate the airways with breathless fear-mongering. These cheerleaders of war, once they are proven wrong, are adept at issuing mea culpas. They assure us of their good intentions. They did not mean to peddle disinformation. They only wanted to keep the world safe from evildoers and protect our national security. No one, even those within the Bush and now Trump administrations, are intentionally dishonest. It's not their fault if they act on flawed intelligence. The problem is one of judgment, not virtue. They are good people. But Hedges writes, but this perhaps is the biggest lie. The intelligence assessments used to justify the war against Iraq were cooked up by a cabal of lunatic neoconservatives and rabid Zionists because they did not like the assessments of the Central Intelligence Agency and other intelligence agencies. Now, another cabal dominated by Israel firsters, is concocting bogus intelligence assessments to justify a war with Iran. These wars are not prosecuted in good faith. They are not based on a careful and rational assessment. They are utopian visions severed from reality, where our own intelligence agencies are ignored, along with international bodies such as the United Nations. Let me see. The pimps of war who orchestrate these military fiascos have risen once again from the crypt. They migrate like zombies from administration to administration, and they are ensconced in think tanks, which he names funded by corporations, the lobby and the war industry. They are puppets jerked up and down by their masters, given megaphones by bankrupt media, urging us forward from one quagmire to the next. And it's all happening again. So, I think I saw a little bit, Joe, of 7:30 report, and a former member of a Conservative government's public service, Pizzulo or someone like that, was trotted out giving his opinion on something. And I'm just going, what? ABC and David Spears, why are you trotting out that guy? And he, of course, gave a version of events, and I was like, well, where's the contrary version, Spears? Like, where is it? But no, we didn't get that. So we just got a one-sided view, as we typically do from the ABC. And if you are a dissenter in the system, then you just get sacked. So US Colonel Nathan McCormack, head of the Levant and Egyptian branch of the Joint Chiefs of Staff's J5 Planning Directorate, was moved from his position after he criticised Washington's unwavering support for Israel. He had written things like, "Our worst ally. We get literally nothing out of the partnership other than the enmity of millions of people." He said that in a post which was discovered. He had it in a semi-anonymous X account, but the Jewish News Syndicate tracked him down and linked it to him and made it public, and now he's being sacked. So, Joe, if you're wondering how do we get in this position where people in power are all in lockstep on this shit, even though a huge part of the population doesn't agree and a huge part of the intelligence service doesn't agree, and aren't there people there who are going to object to this? Well, when they do object, they just get sacked.
I was going to say, do you remember Robin Cook, UK Labour MP, who resigned in 2003, was a cabinet member and resigned over the fact that Britain was going to go to war in Iraq.
There you go. Yep. So either sacked or resign.
Yep.
And these monsters continue on. There's no stopping them. Yeah. So this guy tried to hide his stuff in a semi-anonymous social media post, but got tracked down by the Jewish News Syndicate.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, if you're wondering how captured the US of A and other democracies are by the Jewish lobby, I'm about to play you a clip. This is Trump's State Department spokesperson, Tammy Bruce. So, Joe, this continues to amaze me that so much of American communication is done by these spokespeople who come out in front rather than the real people. But she's one of them, and this is what she was said in an interview.
Spin doctors, I think, was the old name for them.
Yeah. But spin doctors often are in the shadows here in Australia, behind the scenes, creating the sound bites and the phrases, but still the politicians go out and give them, whereas in America they have these spokespeople. But here's Tammy Bruce, one of these spokespeople.
The pride of being able to be here and do work that facilitates making things better for people, and in the greatest country on earth, next to Israel. It's an honor to be able to make a difference and to be able to speak.
The greatest country on earth next to Israel. Like, this is the American spokesperson, State Department spokesperson, and she says something like that. It's
by what metric for either of them?
Well, that's right. But you would think in that position, it's just great to be able to help America, the greatest country on earth, next to Israel.
By GDP, I suppose, US. Don't know about Israel.
Yeah. You know, talk about a captured country when your State Department spokesperson qualifies.
They're not actually the best country on earth.
That's right. And in fact, Israel is.
Mm.
I looked up her Wikipedia just to see if she was, Israeli or Jewish background. Doesn't seem to be. She was originally a lefty and became conservative, sort of heavily involved in feminism, and is a pro-choice lesbian, which just demonstrates, Joe, that diversity and equality and identity issues count for nothing.
You see, Israel would allow her to be lesbian, whereas Iran wouldn't.
True, maybe. But yeah, just because you've got diversity of cultures and genders and sexual preferences doesn't mean you get any better results. It just is an opportunity for those minority groups to fuck it up as
badly as the others, yes.
As badly as the old white men do. Just demonstrates that. Like, you don't need diversity of these identities. You need diversity of class warfare issues, I think. But anyway, that was Tammy Bruce. What else have I got here? The Democrats overall, like I was talking to my wife about this one, Joe, is like she's just shaking her head as she's looking at this news items and going, that bloody Trump. And I said, it would have been the same under Democrats. Like if Kamala Harris, Joe, was in charge, do you think it would be any different?
Maybe she wouldn't have been quite so obsequious to the Israeli lobby, but there'd be an awful lot of pressure on her to do so.
Mm. Wonder if there's an Epstein file on her.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Mm.
Well, that was one of the hypotheses, wasn't it?
Yes.
That he was being funded by Mossad.
Yeah, well, or threatened by them, Trump, in that they had some dirt on him from that sort of stuff.
Oh, no. Epstein
was being funded.
Yeah.
Well, it would make sense, wouldn't it? Imagine if you were Mossad and you thought, there's all these powerful people doing naughty stuff. Let's make it happen so we can get the dirt on them if they're ever in a position where we might need them.
Yeah.
I
don't know that they were going out and doing dirty stuff on their own, but given the opportunity to partake, they willingly partook.
Yes. So it would make sense for Mossad to go, well, let's help this little enterprise along and we'll record whatever happens and save it for a rainy day. Yeah. Chris says, have you guys seen any of the Election Truth Alliance stuff? The guys looking into the statistics of previous US elections. No. James says hello. Hello, James. Alex says, lobbyists clearing the way for war. Scott Morrison took up a role promoting military interests. Lots of others going through the revolving door of politics. That is true.
That because Rugby Australia wouldn't have him.
Yes. Smart move.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody would want him.
No.
And the only reason the military-industrial complex would take him was to demonstrate to existing members of parliament, look, we'll give a job to anybody. Even this fuckwit Scott Morrison will get a job here. So do the right thing by us.
Toe the line, yeah.
Yes. Do the right thing by us and literally anyone will get a job, including that bozo. And here's evidence. We've given him a job. So you can count on us. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
I did see and I can recommend this, Jon Stewart has a podcast and he had Christiane Amanpour, and I don't know if you know who that is. She was CNN's... Sorry?
Whose podcast was this?
Jon Stewart.
Oh, yes.
So she is the lead anchor for CNN, and she's half Iranian. So she has a lot of friend and family in Iran, and was saying that, this is completely counterintuitive. All you've done is, rather than having the people pissed off at the regime, they're now all getting behind it because they're their saviors.
Yep. Idiots in America think that somehow this is going to potentially lead to regime change. And in fact, it's going to do exactly the opposite, because even people who hate the regime recognise that they don't want foreigners taking over. They've seen that play out in countless other countries, and the Iranians are not dills, Joe. There's a lot of smart people in Iran. Iranians I've dealt with over the years have all been particularly smart people, and they were like, well, okay, we don't like our regime, but we are going to stand behind whatever regime's in place to fight off this enemy attack by these foreigners, and we'll deal with the regime at another time and another place. But for the moment, we need to band together. So the thought that this could lead to regime change, it's going to do exactly the opposite. Unless, of course, Joe, you were to follow up the bombing with some sort of ground force and tanks and troops and storm the capital, and that's not going to happen because it's just too hard.
Well, Iraq tried.
Yes. So, yeah, and they won't have the stomach for that. I wouldn't have thought. But, yeah, what did I say about regime change? So, people are saying that. And you've got idiots like John Bolton thinking that this is going to lead to regime change. I think I've got a clip of him. Joe, he's the guy we mentioned last week. The joke in the shovel was that upon hearing about the bombing of Iran, he had to be hospitalised because of a 5-hour erection. That was that guy?
Yeah, so he was Trump's something minister in the previous cabinet.
Yes. He'd never seen a coup that he didn't like. And
who hates Trump now.
Yep. So dickheads like this at this moment, these moments in history. Sorry, dear listener, for the language, by the way, but it's hard not to just be so scathing of these guys. Gets trotted out on panels to give his 2 cents worth and say stupid things like this.
For being here. Were you surprised that President Trump took such decisive action?
Well, let me say this unequivocally. I think President Trump made the right decision for America to attack Iran's nuclear weapons program. And I think we're on the verge of potentially seeing regime change in Iran as part of that. I think this is a huge change in the Middle East. It was a decisive action. It was the right thing to do. I thought somebody should do it for a long time, but better late than never.
Yeah. So he thinks it's going to lead to regime change. Yeah, you don't topple governments with an air campaign and bombardment alone. You need a full-scale invasion.
Well, unless the populace is ready.
Yeah. But that just doesn't look like it's anything like that in the Iranian case. Yeah. International law, international rule of law. Well, they're two different things, aren't they, Joe? We've mentioned before that the rules-based international order, I think was the phrase.
Yep.
That was invented by Kevin Rudd. He was the one who came up with that phrase in the first place because he wanted to talk about situations which weren't actually about international law, you know, treaties and actual law, but the conventions that had been built up conveniently in favour of Western powers, especially the United States, as you know, the international rules-based order. And where was I heading with that? So if I'm talking about international law, that's quite different to the international rules-based order. But Greg Barnes, writing in the John Menadue blog, I think Greg Barnes is some sort of senior counsel or something like that, I think. He's got some sort of legal qualifications. Have I got it here? Might have. No, I didn't include that in these notes. But he says, what's missing from the discourse? It's a clear breach of international law. He says, a betrayal of the so-called rules-based order. Apparently, the rules-based order and respect for international law only applies to those nations who are not allies, China, Russia and Iran. But Israel and its back, the United States, are off the hook. So why are Israel's actions unlawful? Under Article 2, subsection 4 of the 1945 UN Charter, it states, members must refrain from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state or any other manner inconsistent with the UN's purposes. Now, the US and others might try and rely on Article 51 that preserves the right to self-defence. And that Article 51 says, nothing in the present charter shall impair the inherent right of individual or collective self-defence if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations until the Security Council has taken measures necessary to maintain international peace and security. Israel, he says, has no basis for recourse under Article 51, despite what Penny Wong and Richard Marles claim that it's within its rights to do so. He says, Iran is, he's quoting here Professor Ben Saul from the University of Sydney. Iran is obviously not attacking Israel with nuclear weapons. It's also not about to attack Israel, given it has not built a single nuclear weapon, let alone indicated a specific threat to use one. So the neocons in America and elsewhere have invented the idea of anticipatory self-defense, Joe, where you say, it looks like those guys might get a bomb, so we, in self-defense, can hit them now. He writes, it's intellectually untenable because it means any nation can decide another might be a threat and therefore invade it.
Oh, you mean like Russia did?
Yes.
Ukraine?
Well, yes. But it's a concept being trotted out again by the usual suspects to justify Israel's conduct. So yeah, it's a situation where total breach of international law, but hey, it's America and it's Israel, so that's all good. What else have I got here? Remember Tulsi Gabbard, Joe, last week?
Trying to forget her.
Yeah, because I said to you, wouldn't it be handy if, say, 3 months ago, the intelligence assessment was known? About Yeah. And she pretty much categorically said,
yep, no
problem there. In fact...
And got in trouble for it, apparently.
Yes. She said the intelligence community continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorised the nuclear weapons program he suspended in 2003. Pretty clear cut, you would have thought. But that, of course, was not what Trump wanted to hear. And Tulsi Gabbard came out and said in a tweet just in the last day or so, the dishonest media is intentionally taking my testimony out of context and spreading fake news as a way to manufacture division. America has intelligence that Iran is at the point that it can produce a nuclear weapon within weeks to months if they decide to finalise the assembly. President Trump has been clear that can't happen, and I agree. Bit of a flip-flop there, Joe.
Yeah.
seems to me. Bit of a flip-flop. So
did she give what context the quote was in?
No, she didn't. She did not say how she'd been misquoted. She just said that the media had misquoted her. By the way, back in 2020, when she wasn't working for Trump, this is what she had to say about Trump.
President Trump says that he doesn't want war with Iran, but that's exactly what he wants. Because that's exactly what Saudi Arabia, Netanyahu, Al-Qaeda, Bolton, Haley, and other neocons and neolibs want. That's what he puts first, not America.
There's no shame amongst these people, Joe, as they flip-flop from one position to another.
Well, don't forget J.D. Vance was an ever-Trumper.
Yeah. Whether it was 5 years ago or whether it was one day ago, it's like, oh, if something I said was inconvenient, then don't worry about that. We'll just move on and we'll say completely the opposite and blame the media for misleading us. So
get bought off by a nice sofa.
Yeah. Trump was confronted about what she had said. What she had said sort of in 3 months ago, and this is how he reacted. I think the audio of this might be a bit shaky, but we'll see if it comes through.
Well, then my intelligence community is wrong. Who in the intelligence community said that?
Your director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
That's it. She's just wrong. So when it comes to Trump's justification for bombing Iran's nuclear facilities, despite the intelligence community telling him it's not a threat, he just says, I've looked at it and they're wrong. Yeah. And therefore I can just launch a bomb.
Anybody who disagrees with my current version of reality is wrong.
Yes. And under the sort of interpretation of self-defense, if I think somebody might attack me or one of my allies, then I can just bomb them straight up as a matter of self-defense if I get the feeling in my waters that this is going to happen.
It's that classic Mythbusters quote. I reject your version of reality and substitute it with my own.
Yes. Yeah. We live in Orwellian times, don't we, Joe? Yeah. So was there new intelligence? So this is Peter Hegseth, US Secretary of Defense. So he was asked, hey, Tulsi Gabbard just a couple of months ago said no threat from Iran is the general intelligence community opinion. How come you're now saying there is a threat? And this is what Pete Hegseth had to say.
There. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Concerning the justification for these strikes, in March, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence released their threat assessment, concluding, quote, Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear programs he suspended in 2003, unquote. So what new intelligence does the U.S. have since then that the Iranians have changed their position on nuclear weapons? And does this new intelligence come from U.S. sources and methods, or are we getting this information from other countries?
Well, I would just simply say that the president's made it very clear. He's looked at all of this, all of the intelligence, all of the information, and come to the conclusion that the Iranian nuclear program is a threat, and was willing to take this precision operation to neutralize that threat in order to advance American national interests, reduce the Iranian nuclear program, and obviously collective self-defense of ourselves and our allies. So he looked at all of it, understood the nature of the threat, and took bold action I think the American people would expect in a commander-in-chief. That's all we've got. Thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
He plucked this opinion out of his arse, and I'm going to say anything to justify it.
That's it. It doesn't matter what the experts say. He came to his own conclusion. It completely contradicts that. And there you go. That's where we're at. And that's his answer. Yeah. JD Vance. I don't think I put the clip in this bunch.
I think it was because Tulsi wasn't included in the Signal chat and therefore she didn't get the update.
Yes, maybe that's it. Don't have the JD Vance one, but what did he said? Basically, I empathise with Americans who are exhausted after 25 years of foreign entanglements in the Middle East. I understand the concern, but the difference is back then we had a dumb presidents. That's essentially what JD Vance said. Is it was bad in the past, but we had dumb presidents.
Sure. Whereas this president is so intelligent.
Yes.
You know because he told you so.
Yeah. Israeli officials, how was the bombing effective? Israeli officials and senior American officials have told the New York Times that the US bombing of Iran's underground Fordow nuclear site didn't destroy the facility despite President Trump's pronouncements. Two Israeli officials told the paper that the initial assessment by the military, based on satellite images, was that the strikes seriously damaged but didn't completely destroy it. Blah, blah, blah. We'll see how that pans out. What does Keir Starmer in the UK say, Joe? He says Iran should return to the negotiating table. The problem is Iran was at the fucking negotiating table.
Yes.
When it got bombed. Like, they were negotiating. They were in the middle of it. Next one planned for like on the Monday after the weekend. They got bombed.
Yes, but he doesn't want the US to invade the UK, so he's got to play along.
So telling the Iranians, well, you better return to the negotiating table. Well, we're just waiting to clear the dust off the table from all the bombing that's occurred, for God's sake. Even the Iranian foreign minister says, some countries have called me and said, return to diplomacy. And I replied to them, but we were already in the middle of diplomacy when we got attacked. What diplomacy? Yeah. What did Albanese say? At a press conference, the Prime Minister begins by saying the world has long agreed that Iran cannot be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. We support action to prevent that. Thanks a lot, Albanese. Essentially green lighting what the Americans did. Greens, David Schubert said, we need to clarify where the pine gap was used in this attack.
Yeah, I mean, apparently the B-2s took off from Diego Garcia.
Mm-hmm.
And there's questions about whether the UK is in violation of international law for that.
Whether the UK is?
Yeah.
Old Labor guys like Doug Cameron are saying that Labor members should join Labor against war. I think some of the old Labor guys are pretty pissed with this current bunch with how they're doing this. And
well, Tony Blair was kind of the beginning of the end of UK Labour, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. Just some humour, Joe, to finish up with. Three humorous ones. From The Shovel, headline, Baron Trump diagnosed with bone spurs. Pure coincidence.
What a surprise.
Caitlin Johnson says, stop being so hard on Trump. You'd probably attack Iran too if someone was threatening to leak your child molestation video. And we'll finish off, Joe, with Martin Sheen telling a great story about Trump, which really...
oh, I think I've heard this one.
Yes. Here we go.
Now, I have to say, I'm slightly surprised that Piers Morgan's doing it because I don't know if you know, he's a big Donald Trump supporter. And I know you're not a fan.
I'm really not. No, I am reminded of a time about 5 years ago. I was at a dinner with my ex-wife Brooke and her family and this and that. And about halfway through, I noticed Donald staring at my watch. And so he started saying, you know, listen, I'm sorry that I wasn't invited to your wedding, this and that. Or I'm sorry I can't make your wedding. And I'm like, I didn't invite you. So he says, but, you know, I want to give you an early wedding gift as a gesture from me and Melania. And she doesn't say a word. She's very sweet and very pretty, but just kind of sits there, you know. Yeah. Anywho, so he says, these are platinum diamond Harry Winston. And he pulls off his cufflinks. And he gives them to me. And so I'm like, oh, gosh, Mr. Trump, you really shouldn't do this. He goes, no, it's the least I can do and, you know, have a great marriage and all that. Little did he know. So smash cut to about 6 months later. I had some jewelry getting appraised at the house, you know, and she finished and was leaving. And I said, oh, yeah, you know, there's another couple of pieces that I have that I'm very curious about. Would you mind appraising these? She said, no, what are they? I said, well, you know, I explained the dinner and this and that. These are from Donald Trump, Harry Winston, you know, flawless D's, platinum. She took the loop, spent about 4 seconds and kind of recoiled from it, much like people do from Trump. And so she says, in their finest moment, this is cheap pewter and bad zirconias. And they're stamped Trump. And I just thought, what does this really say about the man? You know, that he said, here's like a great wedding gift, and it's just a bag of dog shit, you know?
Graham Norton's always a great watch.
Just none of that surprises us, does
No.
it? Like, well, it would have been incredibly surprising if it really was proper expensive jewelry.
Yeah.
It was always going to be a heap of fake shit. It's the man in charge of the most powerful country in the world.
Yeah, he's a shyster.
Just making the worst decisions.
He is a con man through and through.
Yeah.
And he's in charge of some pretty fierce weaponry.
Mhm.
And what a state of the world we're in.
He conned enough Americans to vote for him.
Yeah. Let me see. What's in the chat room here?
There's a YouTube video as to whether the election was rigged, and I think really without some serious people behind it, I'm going, that's the same sort of conspiracy that happened in 2020. And really we shouldn't be wasting time talking about it.
No.
And then another video, which is an AI generated of baby Trump.
Right.
Arguing with various people.
Okay. That's in our chat. Is that what's happening?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, don't need those. Let's see. What does Alex say? One thing that's being made very clear recently is that if you are attacked by a significantly more powerful enemy, large numbers of drones is a much better type of weapon than large value, high impact equipment. Iran will be going flat out, rearming with long-range drones with an emerging tech in high use. Might end up providing high-tech drones to everyone the US does not want to have. So,
well, it's been suggested that the Ukrainian plan of the containerized mini drones with a remote control, basically shipping containers with a bunch of drones with a remote control station sitting in the shipping container being commanded from wherever. And you could sail a container ship up the coast of wherever. Because, you know, there are thousands of container ships floating around at any time with thousands of containers on board. And you could launch an attack on an installation with very little that you could do against it. Apparently, after this attack, a lot of air-based commanders are seriously shitting themselves as to how the hell do we counter against this sort of thing.
There's one country in the world that I think of if you were trying to get lots of drones manufactured, and
Ukraine?
China. No,
Okay.
China. They've got the manufacturing capacity. So, and they and Russia are still sort of keen, I think, to look after Iran. They wouldn't want to see Iran toppled. So, wouldn't surprise me if they agreed to provide plenty of drones to Iran down the track. Keep them out of the clutches of America.
I have heard apparently Straits of Hormuz are likely to be shut.
One of the options.
Well, yeah. just any traffic going through there is going to get attacked.
Mm. Well, there you go, dear listener. That is an up-to-date review of what the hell is happening over there in that part of the world. We'll see what more shitfuckery eventuates over the next 7 days. We'll be back. We'll be back next week. Bye for now.
And it's a good note from him.